The day the CEO replaced me with his son was the same day he thanked me for saving his company. My name is Ellen Harper, and for the past year, I had been the person everyone called when something broke, when a client threatened to leave, when the numbers stopped making sense. I was the one who built the software that kept the company breathing. I wrote it line by line, tested it myself, and stayed awake night after night fixing problems no one else understood. When I arrived, the company was bankrupt in everything but paperwork. When that year ended, it was reporting 9-figure profit for the first time in its history. That morning, the CEO stood in front of the staff and said my name only once. "Ellen has done excellent technical work," he said, smiling politely. "But from today forward, we need leadership that represents the future. My son, Ryan, will be stepping in as chief executive." People clapped. Some avoided my eyes. Ryan nodded like he had earned it. After the applause died down, I pulled the CEO aside. I kept my voice steady. "You promised this role was earned by results," I said. "You've seen the numbers. You know who built this." He laughed, not loudly, but enough to make his point. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single bill, and pressed it into my hand. $100, he said. "That's your real value. You should take it and be grateful." I looked at the bill. Then I looked at him. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I thanked him, turned around, and walked out of the building without another word. What he did not understand was that I did not leave empty-handed. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It is designed to explore themes of power, loyalty, and consequences in the workplace. While inspired by real emotions and real-world dynamics, all characters, companies, and events are fictional. That night, I did not sleep. I reviewed documents I had written months earlier, agreements no one bothered to read closely. By the time morning came, the company was still standing, but it no longer belonged to the people who thought I was disposable. I met the CEO for the first time in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the financial district. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We're running out of weeks," he said, sliding a thin folder across the table. "Not months, weeks." I opened it and skimmed the reports. Legacy clients threatening to walk. Systems patched so many times no one remembered what the original code looked like. Missed deadlines. Penalty clauses. "This is unstable," I said. "One bad day could shut everything down." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "That's why you're here, Ellen." "I'm not here to perform miracles," I replied. "I'm here to fix what can be fixed." He nodded quickly, like someone agreeing because there was no other option. "Your title will be head of systems. You'll report directly to me." I waited. "An authority?" I asked. "You'll have operational control," he said. Then added, "Within reason." That was the first red flag. I ignored it. A senior manager cleared his throat. "Just so we're aligned, Ellen, the board is very sensitive right now. Any disruption could scare investors." I looked at him. "The disruption already happened. You're just living with the delay." Silence followed. The CEO broke it. "Fix the system," he said. "And you'll never have to worry about your place here." I held his gaze. "I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for trust." "You'll have it," he said, too quickly. Over the next days, every conversation sounded the same. A developer whispered, "No one's touched this code in years." An account manager said, "Clients only stay because switching costs too much." Another exec warned me, "Don't step on toes. People here guard their territory." I worked anyway, late nights, early mornings. I rewrote processes others were afraid to touch. One evening, as I packed up, the CEO stopped by my desk. "You're moving fast. I don't have a choice," I said. He smiled. "Neither do we." That was the moment I understood the imbalance. I was risking my reputation. He was risking nothing but time. Still, I stayed. Because when a company is freezing, someone has to go into the cold first. The system did not fail all at once. It failed quietly, in ways that only showed up when clients were already angry. "This report is wrong again," said Mark from finance, standing behind my chair. "If this goes out, we breach contract." "Give me 10 minutes, I said, without looking up. "You said that yesterday." "I fixed yesterday," I replied. "This is a different problem." By the end of the first month, I was no longer fixing errors. I was replacing the entire foundation. I wrote new logic to cut duplicate processes, rerouted workflows that wasted labor, and built compliance checks that ran automatically instead of relying on human reminders. One night, a developer named Luis leaned over my screen. "No one's ever touched this layer before. That's why it's breaking," I said. The CEO started stopping by more often. He never asked how the system worked. "Clients are calmer," he said one evening. "What did you change?" "I made it cheaper to operate and harder to fail." I answered. He nodded, satisfied without understanding. The first legacy client to renew called me directly. "I don't know what you did," she said, "but the errors stopped. I want you on every call from now on." After that, the calls didn't stop. "Can Ellen review this before we sign? Is Ellen available this afternoon?" I don't trust the numbers unless Ellen confirms them. In meetings, people stopped looking at the executive team and started looking at me. Mark said it once, half joking. "If Ellen quits, we're finished." The room went quiet. The revenue curve changed next. Loss flattened, then reversed. Growth followed, faster than anyone expected. Departments that had been marked for layoffs were suddenly hiring again. The CEO clapped me on the shoulder one morning. "You're making me look very smart." I didn't smile. "I'm making the system stable." He laughed. "Same thing." It wasn't the same thing. I could feel it shifting. Trust was moving away from titles and toward results. Every fix made me more essential. Every success made someone else less comfortable. I kept working anyway, because the company needed the system to survive. And I needed proof that I was not replaceable. That proof would matter sooner than I expected. Ryan showed up to his first strategy meeting without an introduction. He sat beside his father, opened a leather notebook, and smiled at the room like he already belonged there. "We need to think bigger," Ryan said, tapping his pen. "This is about vision, not just systems." I looked at him. "Which part of the system are you referring to?" He hesitated for half a second. "All of it. The overall architecture. That architecture is what's keeping our largest client compliant," I said. "If you want changes, we need specifics." Ryan glanced at his father. The CEO cleared his throat. "Ellen, let's not get too deep into details right now," he said. "We're talking direction." Direction. That word started replacing answers. In the weeks that followed, my calendar changed. Meetings I used to lead were moved without notice. Decisions were made before I was informed. During one review, I spoke up. "This rollout schedule ignores the testing window." Ryan waved a hand. "We'll figure it out as we go. That's how outages happen," I said. The CEO cut in. "Let's stay flexible." After the meeting, I passed the conference room and heard my name. "She's very capable," the CEO said quietly. "But she's technical." Ryan replied. "Exactly. We need someone who can inspire confidence. Investors don't care about code. She's done her part," the CEO said. "Now we need leadership." I stepped away before they saw me. Later that day, Mark from finance stopped by my desk. "You're not on the executive review anymore." "I wasn't told," I said. He lowered his voice. "Between us, this doesn't feel accidental." Ryan started presenting numbers I had prepared. He skipped explanations and spoke in polished phrases. "Operational efficiency," he said once, glancing at my chart. "That's the takeaway." Afterward, he leaned toward me. "You should be proud. This wouldn't exist without you. It wouldn't function without me either," I said. He smiled politely. "That's not how leadership works." That was when it became clear. My work wasn't the problem. My influence was. Results had given me leverage, and leverage made them nervous. From that moment on, I stopped expecting fairness and started paying attention to control. The CEO took the microphone with a practiced smile, the kind meant to reassure people who had already made up their minds. "This year has been extraordinary," he said. "What we've achieved together proves what teamwork can do." Teamwork. He let the word hang there. Broad enough to mean nothing. He thanked the sales department. He thanked operations. He thanked the board for their patience during challenging times. My name did not come up once. I stood near the back with the engineers. Luis shifted beside me. "Did he forget you?" he whispered. "I don't think so," I said. The CEO cleared his throat. "As we celebrate this milestone, it's also time to look ahead." Ryan stepped closer to the stage. The movement was subtle, rehearsed. "From today forward," the CEO continued, "my son will be leading the company as chief executive. He represents the future of this organization." Applause broke out immediately, not enthusiastic, but obedient. Chairs scraped, hands clapped. I felt every sound hit me at once, then fade. Ryan nodded, soaking it in. He didn't look at me. I stayed where I was. My body felt heavy, like the floor had shifted just enough to throw off my balance. Mark glanced back, his expression tight. No one said my name. No one explained anything. When the clapping stopped, the CEO raised his hand again. "This transition has been carefully considered," he said. "Our technical foundation is solid, and now it's time for strategic leadership." That was it. No discussion, no acknowledgement, no warning. Ryan took the microphone. "I'm excited to build on what's been started here," he said. "We'll be moving fast." People turned toward the bar. Conversations resumed, louder than before, as if nothing had happened. Louis leaned close. "Are you okay?" I nodded once. "I need a minute." I walked toward the exit, my ears ringing, my mind painfully clear. This was not a mistake. It was too clean, too public, too final. By the time the doors closed behind me, I understood something important. You don't announce a decision like that unless it has already been decided for a long time. I found the CEO alone in his office. Jacket off, tie loosened. Scrolling through messages like nothing unusual had happened. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up. "Make it quick. It's a busy night." "You replaced me without a word," I said, "after everything I built." He finally raised his eyes, calm and mildly amused. "Ellen, don't take this personally. I didn't realize there was another way to take it," he sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "You were brought in to fix a problem. You fixed it. That doesn't make you permanent." "Permanent," I repeated. "I ran this system. I held every major client together, and you were compensated for that," he said very fairly. I stepped closer. "You promised me stability. You said I wouldn't have to worry about my place here." He stood, walked to his desk drawer, and pulled out a single bill. He placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it. $100, he said. "This is what you should focus on, what you were hired to do, not what you imagined you were becoming." I opened my hand and looked at it. "You should be grateful," he continued. "Most people get nothing when they're done." I waited for the anger. It didn't come. What I felt instead was something sharp and quiet, like a door closing. "So that's it," I said. "After a year like this," he shrugged. "You were temporary help. Ellen, don't confuse effort with ownership." I nodded once. "Thank you for clarifying." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's it. That's it," I said. I placed the bill back on his desk, smoothed it flat, and stepped away. "Good luck," I added. He smiled. Already turning back to his screen. "You'll land on your feet. Someone like you always does." I walked out without another word. The hallway felt longer than it had before. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. I went straight to my desk, packed only what I needed, and left the building quietly. Outside, the night air was cold and steady. I folded the $100 carefully and slipped it into my wallet. Not as payment, as a reminder of exactly who they thought I was. I submitted my resignation before midnight. No speech, no accusations. Just a single sentence confirming my departure, effective immediately. Human Resources replied within minutes, formal and relieved. Luis caught me at the elevator. "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said. "That's it." His voice dropped. "After everything, that's it," I repeated. He shook his head slowly. "They're making a mistake." "They already did," I said, and stepped inside. By morning, my access badge no longer worked. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how quiet everything felt. No calls, no messages from leadership. Just a few short texts from coworkers who didn't know what to say. Mark wrote, "I'm sorry." Another message followed. "This doesn't feel right." I didn't respond. Around noon, my phone rang. The CEO's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into a system I still had full authority over. Not theirs. Mine. The contracts were exactly as I remembered. Clear language, clean signatures, clauses no one had questioned because no one thought they would matter. I activated the first notice with a few keystrokes, then the second. Each one triggered automatically, timed and compliant. No warnings were sent, no alarms sounded. I didn't delete anything. I didn't lock anyone out. I simply withdrew what I was no longer obligated to provide. At 11:30, My phone buzzed again. The CEO, this time by text. We need to talk. I placed the phone face down and closed my laptop. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. Calm in a way that comes from preparation, not anger. They believed silence meant surrender. They believed I had walked away empty-handed. That belief would last until the morning. My phone started ringing just after 9. I let it ring twice before answering. Ellen, the CEO said, breathless. We have a situation, I'm aware, I said. The system isn't responding. Transactions are stuck. Clients are calling nonstop. It's responding, I replied, just not to you. There was a pause. What does that mean? It means the licensing period ended, I said. And I am no longer obligated to extend it. That's not possible, he snapped. You can't just shut us down. I didn't shut anything down, I said evenly. I withdrew access. There's a difference. I heard another voice in the background. Ryan, tell her to fix it, he said. This is getting out of hand. The CEO covered the phone. Ryan says the team is working on a workaround. Which team, I asked. Silence. The developers didn't come in, the CEO said finally. No one can reach them. They don't work for you, I said. They work for my company. Their contracts ended when mine did. Ryan's voice rose. That's not how companies work. That's exactly how contracts work, I said. A notification chimed on my screen. A message from a client I recognized immediately. We are pausing operations until Ellen Harper confirms system stability. Another followed, then another. The CEO's voice cracked. We're losing control of this. No, I said. You already lost it. Ryan grabbed the phone. You're doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because you thought leadership was interchangeable. I said, it isn't. He scoffed. We'll replace you. You already did. I replied. The line went quiet. By noon, the board was calling emergency meetings. By mid-afternoon, Ryan stopped giving orders and started asking questions he couldn't answer. I sat at my desk, watching the notifications roll in, not with satisfaction, but with certainty. They had mistaken ownership for understanding, and now the company was learning the difference, one silent system at a time. The CEO asked me to meet him that afternoon, not in his office, in the smaller boardroom, the one without windows. He stood when I entered. Ryan was already there, pacing. You did this on purpose, Ryan said the moment he saw me. You're sabotaging the company. I took a seat and placed something on the table between us. A single bill, folded once, $100, I said. You gave this to me and called it my value. The CEO looked at it, then away. This isn't the time for theatrics. It's exactly the time, I replied. Because now we're going to be honest. He exhaled slowly. What do you want? I don't want anything, I said. I'm here to explain what happens next, Ryan scoffed. We'll replace your system. We'll hire someone else. You've been trying since this morning, I said. How's that going? He opened his mouth. The CEO raised a hand. Ryan stopped. I leaned forward. You have two options. Option 1, you keep your son in charge. The company doesn't collapse today. It just bleeds. Clients leave one by one. Regulators start asking questions. You spend the next year explaining why everything that worked suddenly doesn't. The CEO swallowed. Option 2, I continued. You reverse the announcement, publicly. You restore my authority over the system and operations. I relicense the software. The developers return. Clients resume service. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. You can't blackmail us like this. This isn't blackmail, I said. This is leverage you ignored when it was quiet. The CEO turned to his son. Enough. Ryan stared at him. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing the company, the CEO said. He reached for the folder I had placed beside the bill. His hand shook as he signed. This decision will be corrected, he said quietly. Effective immediately. I stood. Send the notice, then I'll restore access. He nodded once. As I walked toward the door, I heard Ryan say my name. I didn't turn around. The paper on the table felt heavier than victory. The announcement went out within the hour, short, precise, correcting the earlier decision and restoring operational authority to me. No explanations, no apologies. Ryan cleared out his office before the end of the day. He didn't argue this time. He avoided eye contact, nodded stiffly to a few people, and left without saying goodbye. By the following week, His name was quietly removed from internal documents. No scandal followed him, only silence and a reputation that no longer carried weight. The CEO stayed, but not in the way he once had. He stopped issuing directives and started asking questions. Months later, he stepped back entirely, citing personal reasons. His legacy settled into something smaller than he had planned. Defined not by growth, but by a lesson learned too late, I remained, not as a favor, not as a compromise. Every agreement was rewritten, authority clarified, ownership documented in language no one could ignore again. When people spoke to me now, they didn't praise my dedication, they asked for my decisions. One afternoon, the CEO approached my desk, hands folded. "You could have walked away," he said. "I did walk away," I replied. "You just didn't realize what I was carrying." He nodded slowly. "I see it now." I watched him leave, not with satisfaction, but with distance. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by refusing to be erased, by making my work visible in ways that could not be dismissed or minimized. Before the story ends, I want to leave you with this life lesson. Never confuse silence with weakness. Never assume the person doing the real work has no power simply because they are not the loudest voice in the room. Titles can be handed out. Respect cannot. And your true value is not what someone offers you in dismissal, but what remains when you choose not to disappear. Fire her. My team only needs young people. The words landed clean and sharp, like they had been rehearsed. The CEO's son didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply pointed at the screen, at the line that carried my name, and leaned back as if the decision had already been processed. No build-up, no warning. For a moment, no one spoke. I felt the silence before I felt anything else. Chairs stayed still, pens stopped moving, eyes slid away from me and fixed themselves on the table, the wall, anywhere that wasn't my face, everyone except legal. The company attorney's shoulders stiffened, just slightly, like someone bracing for impact. I straightened in my chair. "Did legal sign off on this?" I asked. He smiled, the kind that comes with borrowed confidence. "This isn't a legal issue. It's a cost issue." "A cost issue," I repeated. "You're too expensive." "Celia," he said, "and frankly, outdated. We're building something faster, younger." I had worked in that building long enough to recognize the moment when a room decides who matters and who doesn't. I closed my notebook, slow and deliberate, and stood. My voice surprised even me with how steady it sounded. "Then you should remember to read the company history," I said. He laughed, short and dismissive. "We're not a museum." I didn't respond. I collected my badge from the table and turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard someone clear their throat. Legal again. Too late. As I reached the hallway, my phone vibrated once in my hand. A calendar alert. Standing weekly meeting. I dismissed it without reading. "My name is Celia." I had been there long before he learned how to pronounce the firm's clients correctly. I didn't walk out in anger. I walked out because the decision had already been made, and not by me. Before the elevator doors closed, I heard my name one last time. Softer now, uncertain. "Wait," someone said. I didn't turn around. "The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It explores power, silence, and the cost of underestimating people whose work keeps systems standing. Any resemblance to real individuals or companies is coincidental. The purpose of this story is not to glorify revenge, but to examine accountability, dignity, and the consequences of careless authority." The elevator descended, and with it, the version of my job they thought they understood. People always assumed I managed a team. That was the first mistake. "You don't have direct reports, right?" Someone from HR once asked me, years ago, flipping through my file. "No," I said. "I design what keeps everyone else from breaking the law." She blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. After the firm nearly collapsed during the post-crisis restructuring, they didn't need another manager. They needed someone who understood how regulators thought, how audits unraveled, how one bad assumption could turn into a federal investigation. That was how I was brought in. Not with fanfare, with urgency. I still remember the first meeting back then. The room smelled like burnt coffee and fear. "If this fails," the CFO had said quietly, "we don't survive the year." So I built systems, compliance frameworks that could explain themselves, risk controls that flagged problems before clients ever noticed, transition architecture designed to hold up when leadership changed, when markets panicked, when people made decisions they didn't fully understand. Can this scale? One executive asked. It's built to endure, I replied. Those are not the same thing. Over the years, people stopped asking how it worked. They only noticed that it did. Audits cleared faster. Regulators stopped calling. Clients stayed calm during volatile quarters. The silence was my success. I was never optimized for growth decks or slide presentations. I was optimized for survival. When the CEO's son joined, he barely acknowledged me, once, in passing. He said, "So you're more back office than strategic." I looked at him and said, "I'm the reason strategy doesn't turn into litigation." He laughed. Assuming it was a joke, it wasn't. I had been hired before his father handed him a badge, before the firm renovated the executive floor, before innovation became a buzzword instead of a necessity. My role was never designed to be visible. It was designed to be irreplaceable. And that was the part he never bothered to learn. His name was Evan Caldwell, and everyone said it with a pause, like the last name needed room to breathe. Evan will be overseeing operational alignment moving forward. The CEO announced the day his son joined, voice proud, careful. He's here to modernize how we think. Evan nodded, already smiling, already confident. Fresh suit, fresh language. We need to trim inefficiencies, he said in his first meeting. Anything that doesn't scale needs to be questioned. I waited. Then I asked. Questioned by whom? He looked at me, amused. By leadership. Legal shifted in her seat. Evan didn't notice. He spoke in numbers pulled from spreadsheets he hadn't built. Headcount ratios, cost curves, salary bands. Once, he said my name while pointing at a slide and added, "This role costs more than some entire teams. It also keeps those teams out of regulatory hearings," I said. He laughed lightly. "You always bring things back to risk." "Because risk is what ends companies," I replied. After that, he stopped inviting me to planning sessions. I found out later they were labeled innovation briefings. Legal wasn't invited either. One afternoon, I passed his office and heard him say, "We don't need to get bogged down in legacy context. We're building forward." Later that day, I ran into the general counsel in the elevator. "He skipped the historical briefing again," she said quietly. "He thinks history is optional," I said. She didn't smile. "It isn't." Evan never asked who designed the systems he wanted to optimize. Never asked why certain clauses existed. Never asked what had almost destroyed the firm years ago. He assumed authority came with answers. Once, during a budget review, he said directly to me, "Titles matter here. Mine carries weight." I met his gaze. "Titles are borrowed," I said. "Outcomes are earned." He stared at me for a second, then looked away, dismissing me with a shrug. That was the moment I understood something clearly. He didn't know where his power came from, and worse, he didn't think he needed to. I wasn't in the room anymore, but I knew exactly what happened the moment the door closed behind me. The meeting didn't continue. "Hold on," the general counsel said, her voice cutting through the space where my chair had been. "What exactly did you just do?" Evan exhaled sharply. "I made a personnel decision. We're moving on." "No," she replied. "You made a declaration. Those are not the same thing." HR finally looked up from her tablet. "Is this an immediate termination?" "Yes," Evan said. "Effective today." There it was. Clean, spoken, recorded. The general counsel didn't argue. She turned to HR instead. "Freeze the process." Evan frowned. "Excuse me," I said. "Freeze it," she repeated. "No paperwork, no notifications, no system changes." "This is getting dramatic," Evan said. "She's an employee, not a shareholder." The general counsel met his eyes for the first time. She came through the acquisition. Silence. The CEO shifted in his seat. "What acquisition, Pinnacle?" she said. "Post-crisis restructuring, Boston office expansion." Evan waved it off. "That was years ago. That has nothing to do with now." "It has everything to do with now," she said calmly. HR. "I need Celia Wren's full personnel file, not the summary, the original." HR hesitated, including the acquisition appendix. "Yes." "And the transition agreements." "Yes." Evan laughed once, sharp and irritated. "You're acting like she's radioactive." "No," the general counsel said. I'm acting like she was hired for a reason. The CEO leaned forward. What reason? She didn't answer him right away. She was already scrolling through her phone, typing with one hand. I'm calling compliance, she said, and finance. For what? Evan asked. To make sure we understand what you just triggered. I triggered efficiency, he snapped. That role was outdated. She looked up then. That role was protected. HR swallowed. Protected how the general counsel closed her phone. That's what we're about to find out. The room stayed quiet after that. No one moved, no one spoke, and somewhere between legal opening the file and HR locking the system, the decision Evan thought he controlled stopped belonging to him entirely. I wasn't in the room, but later that night, the general counsel called me. Her voice was controlled, careful. Celia, I need to confirm something. When you were brought over during the Pinnacle restructuring, do you remember signing an addendum? Yes, I said. It was part of the transition package. Do you remember the clause number 4.9, subsection C? There was a pause on the line, papers shifting. A breath held too long. That clause, she said slowly, was never amended. I know. Inside the conference room, I imagined them gathered around the table. Legal on one side, finance on the other, Evan standing too confidently at the head. The document was old, the margins narrow, the language dense. It had been signed during a year when the firm was bleeding clients and regulators were circling. Back then, the clause hadn't been leverage, it had been insurance. This wasn't severance, the general counsel said. This was protection for continuity. Exactly, I replied. She read aloud, voice flattening into precision, termination, voluntary or involuntary, of the role without a defined transition period and board approval shall trigger a buyout mechanism. Evan cut in, his voice sharp even through the phone. She resigned. After you terminated the role, legal replied, those are different actions. Finance spoke next, quieter. The clause references valuation alignment. The general counsel nodded, indexed to current firm value. Evan scoffed. You're telling me a paragraph from years ago still matters. She didn't look at him. It matters because no one removed it. Another voice joined the call, the head of compliance. If the role is terminated improperly, we also lose continuity certification. Evan's tone shifted. You're overreacting. No, legal said. We're recognizing exposure. Silence followed. Not awkward, heavy. The general counsel cleared her throat. This cannot be undone retroactively. I closed my eyes, phone warm against my ear. I warned him to read the company history. She exhaled. You did. In that moment, the clause stopped being a footnote. It became a boundary no one had respected, and a line no one could now step back across. The general counsel called me back the next morning. No greeting this time. We've run the numbers, she said. This isn't emotional. It's arithmetic. I listened. The clause doesn't care why the termination happened, she continued. Only how. From the other end of the line, I could hear Evan's voice cutting in. She walked away. That matters. It doesn't, legal replied, calm and exact. You terminated the role. On record, the sequence is clear. Finance spoke next, measured. The buyout mechanism ties to current valuation, not base compensation. Evan laughed, sharp. That's not severance. It's not, legal said. Severance would have been cheaper. A chair scraped. Someone sighed. The trigger was immediate termination without board approval or transition. Finance went on. That activates alignment across deferred compensation, equity protection, and continuity guarantees. Evan snapped. Say it in English. Legal didn't look at him. It means the clock started the moment you said effective today. Another pause. Then finance again. Total exposure calculates to 50 million. The word hung there, heavy but precise. Evan's voice dropped. That's impossible. It's documented. Legal said, indexed, audited, signed. By who he demanded. By the board you skipped, she answered. During the Pinnacle restructuring, I finally spoke. I asked you to check with legal. Silence answered me. Evan tried again, softer now. We can reverse it, rehire her, call it a misunderstanding. Legal shook her head. I could hear it in her voice. You can't unring a bell. The termination is recorded. Compliance logged it. HR froze it after, not before. Finance added, reinstatement doesn't negate the trigger. Another voice joined. The head of compliance. Continuity certification is already flagged. Evan swallowed audibly. So what are our options? Legal close the folder, execute the buyout, or compound the exposure. No one argued after that. The number didn't need emphasis. It had done its work, cleanly and completely. The room changed the moment he walked in. No announcement, no small talk. Just the sound of the door closing and chairs straightening as if pulled by instinct. The CEO didn't look at the screen first. He looked at his son. What happened? He said, not asking, while I was gone. Evan spoke quickly. We're streamlining, making the team younger, more agile. The CEO nodded once, then turned to legal. Did the board approve a termination? No, the general counsel said. The role was terminated verbally, effective immediately. The CEO's eyes shifted back to Evan. Did you read the company history? Evan hesitated. That's not relevant to... It's the only thing that's relevant. The CEO said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. This firm didn't survive because we were young. It survived because we remembered what almost killed it. Evan tried again. She was too expensive. The CEO held up a hand. You don't get to decide cost without understanding risk. Finance spoke carefully. The exposure is quantified. 50 million. The CEO didn't flinch. And the trigger. Improper termination. Legal said. No transition. No approval. The CEO closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he didn't look angry. He looked tired. Celia built the safeguards that let us grow, he said. You optimized the one role that was never meant to be optimized. Evan's voice cracked. I was trying to lead. You were trying to act, the CEO replied. Leadership starts with knowing what you are not allowed to break. He turned fully toward his son then, and the room went still. Your job, he said, each word deliberate, is to choose, not to fire. Evan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The CEO looked at legal. Proceed. Then he looked past the table, to the empty chair where I had been sitting. She warned you, he said quietly. No one disagreed. Authority didn't raise its voice. It settled the room, made its decision, and moved on without waiting for permission. They didn't fire Evan. That decision came quietly, buried under language that sounded polite enough to fool anyone who hadn't spent years inside Boston boardrooms. Effective immediately, the CEO said. Evan will transition into a strategic development role. No one congratulated him. Legal slid a document across the table. Budget authority is reassigned. Finance added. All hiring approvals revert to executive review. HR didn't look up when she said, performance oversight will be limited to internal projects. Evan stared at the paper. So I still have my title. Yes, the CEO replied. You keep the title. Evan exhaled, relieved too early. Then this is temporary. The CEO shook his head once. It's structural. Silence followed, thick and unmistakable. Titles mattered in this city, but influence mattered more. Evan would still attend meetings. He would still sit at the table. But nothing would move because he spoke. No budget, no team, no signatures. A presence without gravity. That's it, Evan asked. After everything, legal closed her folder. After everything. This is restraint. I wasn't there, but I heard about it within the hour. A former colleague called, voice low. They didn't touch your agreement, she said. They didn't even argue. They won't, I replied. They're saying you're unreachable. I am. The call started that afternoon. HR first, then finance, then Evan himself. His name lighting up my phone like it still carried authority. I let it ring. A voicemail followed. Celia. This doesn't have to be adversarial. I deleted it. Another message came from legal. Short. Careful. We will proceed as outlined. I replied once. Understood. That was the extent of my participation. Power didn't need my presence anymore. It had already done its work. Evan would learn what influence felt like when it was removed, piece by piece, without ceremony. And I stayed silent, because silence was no longer something being taken from me. It was something I chose. The offer had come in weeks before any of this happened, advisory only. The woman on the other end of the line had said, no politics, no titles to defend. We need judgment. I asked one question. Do I answer to legal or to ego? She smiled. I could hear it in her voice. You answer to outcomes. I accepted without negotiating. When the payment from my former company was processed, there was no back and forth, no bargaining language, no attempt to reframe it as goodwill. Finance sent a confirmation. Legal followed with a clean acknowledgement. The number matched the clause exactly. No deductions, no conditions. A colleague from my old team texted me later that night. They didn't even try to argue. They can't, I replied. Another message came in. This one from Evan. It was shorter than the last. I didn't know. I stared at it for a long moment, then locked my phone. I hadn't left to make a point. I hadn't left to punish anyone. I left because I was done explaining my worth to people who only listened when numbers spoke for me. At my new firm, the first meeting lasted 10 minutes. We reviewed your work, the managing partner said. We trust it. That's it, I asked. That's enough, he replied. No badge, no orientation, no long speech about culture, just access, responsibility, and silence when silence mattered. Back in Boston, things shifted. Meetings were delayed, decisions slowed. People began asking legal questions they'd never bothered to ask before. Names were spoken more carefully. I didn't follow the details closely. I didn't need to. I had stopped waiting for permission to be taken seriously. And once that happened, the rest of the noise faded on its own. It was months later when I heard the change had become policy. A former colleague called me after work, voice low, almost careful. You should know, she said. Legal stopped a termination today. I didn't respond. They asked one question. She continued, just one. Is this role part of the company's history? The room went quiet after that. I closed my laptop, and they postponed everything. HR, finance, even the board rep didn't argue. The call ended without ceremony. That was how most meaningful things did. Evan was still there, technically. His title remained printed on internal directories. His name still listed on meeting invites. But people stopped looking to him for decisions. Budgets went around him. Hiring requests skipped his inbox. When he spoke, notes were taken out of habit, not obligation. I heard he tried to reassert control once. This is inefficient, he said in a meeting. According to someone who was there, legal answered evenly. So is rewriting history. No one backed him up. At my new firm, work moved cleanly. Decisions were short. Conversations were precise. Do you need more time? A partner asked me one afternoon. No, I said. I need clarity. Then you have it, he replied. I never celebrated what happened. I didn't frame it as victory. I treated it the way I treated every system I ever built. Identify the flaw, correct the process, move on. The company learned something it couldn't unlearn, not from a lawsuit, not from a scandal, from a line buried in an old agreement that finally did what it was meant to do. Here is the lesson I took with me and never forgot. Real value does not announce itself. It protects quietly, endures pressure, and leaves a mark only when it is ignored.